Many researchers posit the existence of an international cartel which covertly manipulates world events for their own benefit. Who or what is at the top of this control structure?
You have to force behaviors, whether it's gender or race. We're going to have to force change.
The establishment of world order demands the mobilization of groups dedicated to international pressure for the gradual implementation of that world order.
Conspiracy theorists say that the ultimate Bilderberg agenda is a one-world government.
I think that's exaggerated, but not totally unfair.
The deep state does exist. It steamrolls over anyone who dare oppose the machine and attempt to live free. It must be minimized and, if possible, even annihilated.
I don't know whether we want to get this on tape, but look, you've got to be discreet. You know, you have to protect my future as well as your own. Now, I don't think we should talk too much about this. Well,
the time for euphemisms is over. It's time to name names.
One of the biggest things I discovered was the existence of a supranational committee called the Committee of 300, also known in intelligence circles as the Olympians.
Are these claims simply fantasy and paranoid delusion, or is there truly an agenda to subvert humanity to the demands of the pyramid of power?
Welcome back to the Mel K Show. One of the best, absolute best journalists that is not afraid of anyone or anything. He just wants to tell the truth, and he has a great project we're going to talk about today. I'm excited always to welcome back Derrick Broze to the show. Thank you for joining me, sir.
Thanks for having me on again, Mel. Appreciate it.
Oh, well, you know, I mean, few people have taught me more than you, and I love bringing you on because you always have so much information for the audience. And I'm very excited because you have had a project, the Pyramid of Power, that I have recommended many times. And we have all been waiting for the final episode where you pull it all together. And part one is around. So let's talk a little bit about that project and where you are now and kind of what the people should expect from it.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mel. So for those who haven't heard me share about this before, the Pyramid of Power docuseries is a project I've started back in 2020, around then. And it's been 5 years ongoing. And it started out as, I think I originally conceived it as 10 episodes and then 12 and then 14, 15. And here we are, 2025, and we're wrapping up with the 17th episode. I'll say right away, everybody can watch the 16 episodes, which are publicly available already for free at thepyramidofpower.net. All of those are right there. And the idea with the series, as I've shared with you before, was to kind of take my original research as well as not reinvent the wheel where not necessary, and take some from the best books that already exist, the best documentaries that already exist, condense all that information down and try to report on these in episodes of 30 to 35 minutes or less, and make it something that could be bingeable for the Netflix generation, so people could just get pulled in. And then by, just now that we have 16 episodes going on 17, they could just consume the entire thing. And the idea would be that by the end of that, their entire life might be different. At the very least, they're going to have questions about the state of our world and about government and where power really lies and these sorts of things. And the series starts with education, then media, big tech, it progressively. It starts fairly, I'd say, kind of basic beginner, and then progressively as we go through the seasons all the way to chapter 16. But I wanted to approach this, as I do with all of my documentaries, with a real fact-based approach, a documented and sourced approach. And really, I see this documentary as not a conspiracy documentary, but more about like a true crime documentary, because everything that is in there, it's in my transcript. It's linked to the source documents, to the primary documents, and it's all documentable. And so that was kind of how I was approaching the series in the beginning, with that question in mind. And especially for somebody who might be skeptical to this idea that there is a so-called New World Order, or that there exists plans to establish a so-called New World Order. I wanted to start out really beginner, basic, normie, and then progress through that as we get towards the end. And the idea being that, as I said earlier, somebody can start with no knowledge of this stuff, get pulled in and watch these episodes 30 minutes or less, go to the next one. And as they progress, they're going to continue to get deeper down the rabbit hole with factual information, not with hyperbole, not with fear mongering or with speculation, but actually just what we can prove. And so I had always originally planned that the series would conclude with a final episode that would then say, okay, well, now that we've described the pyramid and the pieces that, with which it reigns, what or who is at the top of the pyramid, if anything, and how do we actually answer that question? And so that is what I've been working on right now, is concluding chapter 17, which, as I was sharing with you a moment ago, it started out as I just kind of got my document open and I was like, I'm going to write, and I've got stacks and stacks of books on the Jesuits and on the Jacobins and on the Frankians, Sabbateans and the Masons and everything else, and trying to really look at these things, claims from it's the Jews or the Zionists, it's the Masons, it's the Jesuits, it's this different group, and give them a fair shake, actually look at what people claim about these things instead of just saying that's crazy, I'm not even going to touch that, but actually look at these topics genuinely and then be able to bring that to the audience. And so it ended up being 4 hours long, which was a little bit too long, I thought. So I was like, okay, I have to find a way to condense this down. And so me and my editor took a little bit of a hacking to it, as much as I could handle. We got down to 3 hours, and I told him, I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't, there's no way this one's going to get any smaller. Anything less, I would feel like we're taking out really important information. And I will say, for those who are like, I want the original, because some people have said, no, you edited stuff out. We are going to be releasing, once the series is done, we're going to turn all the scripts into a companion book, the Pyramid of Power book, which will have everything that's in my scripts in book form, including the final chapter will have my original script. So everything I took out will be in there. And I didn't take out anything that I feel is going to be consequential to the narrative that we're sharing. It's just more like details that might be interesting to super nerds about this, but not necessarily relevant to every single person who's going to be viewing this. So we condensed it down to 3 hours. And even then we decided, let's do this in 2 volumes to not overwhelm people. So volume 1 is about 52 minutes, and we've just released that on August 1st. And then volume 2, it's already written, and I'm going to be recording the audio narration very soon. And my editor is starting and pictures. And I really am excited to share this, because the entire series has been a labor of love, but the final episode, I think this is one of the best things I've ever written in terms of research and the conclusions that, and being able to take such vast topics and kind of condense them down and make it not overwhelming for people, but actually have a narrative that they can follow without being like, oh my God, this is just too much, I need to turn it off. So I think we've succeeded on that. And I'd love to tell you more about some of the details, but just one other thing I'll mention real quick is all of the series, as I said, is available completely for free and will be forever for free. But I did partner with this organization called Civil. They're actually a streaming platform / a podcasting network. And you and I, Mel, their whole goal is just like upgrade civilization. How can we help humanity and help civilization by putting out content that is going to promote liberty and consciousness and awareness? And so they're not trying to replace Netflix or anything like that. They're more niche, but they have a bunch of different content, including original documentaries like my work, but they've also got different documentaries and podcasts on there. The website is CIVL for civil.com. And so volume 17 is currently exclusively available for the month of August. And then it'll go public on September 5th. But the reason I did this partnership with them is because, I don't even have a TV, but for people who watch things on Apple TV or Amazon or Roku, they can join Civil and then watch the entire Pyramid of Power series through those apps and on the ways that they're used to watching it. And so I did so with the hopes that this might make it easier for, a normie or somebody to kind of discover this work or learn about Civil and then discover the Pyramid of Power. And so Civil right now has volume 1, chapter 17 exclusively available on their platform. They've also got some behind the scenes stuff that I sent them, like unreleased interviews that I did for this documentary series that I haven't released anywhere else. And they did give me I'll share this with your audience specifically. They did give me a 50% coupon for anybody who's interested in signing up for their service. You can sign up for an annual subscription and you get access to my series before anybody else. That'll be volume 1 and volume 2 will both come through there for a month first before we put it out publicly, and as well as all the other content there. So if anybody's interested, the website is civl.com/TCR. That's for the Conscious Resistance, my website. So civil.com/TCR. And then when you sign up for an annual subscription, you can use code TCR50, and that'll give you 50% off the subscription. If you want to check it out before anybody else and, see the almost final conclusion, then, that's available.
Great. Well, it couldn't be more timely right now. You would have to really have no interest in humanity or what's going on in the world to not be asking a lot of questions, not about now, but about, now hundreds of years of fraud on the people and lies. Particularly, I think it went into overdrive after World War II, the deception, the fraud on the people of this country and frankly, the world. And you, I know, always bring the receipts. Now, who are some of the people that participated? So, because some great people are involved. I believe Whitney is involved and other people were interviewed for this project. So let's talk about some of the people that you felt added pieces that you wanted to get their own words into the project. Because some of the people that you and I deal with and have for a long time are now, thank God, getting more exposure than they used to have. So, so who participated out that are, people that we all admire and respect as almost everyone.
Yeah, so the series, as I said, was the final episode is kind of trying to look at all the biggest claims, the biggest ones that we hear regularly online, and people who believe these things, they swear that their claim is the right one. And so I wanted to look at each one. So I had different guests kind of specializing in these claims, whether it's the Committee of 300 or the Venetian Black Nobility or the Jesuits or the Vatican or just different things like this. So the final 2 episodes, volume 1, which as I said is available now at Civil, that one features Patrick Wood, who's of course the long-term researcher on technocracy.
Right.
He's the OG in the technocracy research. He's been doing this for a long time. And then it also has Peter Dale Scott, who's another older gentleman. He's kind of, I think, as old as, or if not older than G. Edward Griffin. He's in his 90s. And he still puts out content. He's not as much known, I think, as he deserves to be. He's very much an academic. He's Canadian. He was a poet and a Canadian diplomat, but he's spoken up about 9/11. He's spoken up about a number of things. And I actually have him in volume 1 on the section focused on the deep state, because in the English-speaking world, it is Peter Dale Scott's research with his book about big oil, 9/11, and just financial crimes that really first brought that term deep state into the American English language in the 2010s. And so I have a section there where it's kind of one of the introduction of volume 17, volume 1, where we start with, okay, let's look at who the suspects are. Let's start with deep state. What does this really mean? What is the origin of it? And it goes back to Turkey. And so I share some of that history. And then Peter Dale Scott kind of shares his view on how he thinks the term has been a little bit misused by a lot of different people. And so, for example, maybe some MAGA folk, when they talk about deep state, they think it only applies to left-wing Democrats, progressives, et cetera, instead of meaning something that's above and beyond government that controls both sides. And so he kind of talks about that. Then we have Patrick Wood, and then who else is? Richard Grove over at Grand Theft World, the Tragedy and Hope podcast. He's been a long-term researcher, and he is in the section, one of the kind of closing sections of volume 1, where we talk about the roundtable groups, which is what Carroll Quigley in his book Tragedy and Hope discussed after he had access to the Council on Foreign Relations archives, showing how, as you were saying a moment ago, this group and others, which go back to UK intelligence and the networks over there, that they started manipulating the world even before World War I, but definitely during World War I and World War II. They did so through what they call the roundtable groups, where you would have a public-facing group, let's say the Council on Foreign Relations, that also has a journal with the Council on Foreign Relations that's called Foreign Affairs. But that group actually is representing the opinions of a inner circle, a more secretive group behind them that is unbeknownst to the public. And so Carroll Quigley and then Richard Grove, explaining Carroll Quigley's work, discusses how it is this roundtable structure, which really is part of the pyramid. And so that's one of the areas that the volume 1 kind of starts to leave people on a little bit of a cliffhanger as we get into part 2, because it's like, okay, now that we understand there's this roundtable structure within the deep state, it's not just the World Economic Forum, the Bilderberg Group, the UN. Those are pieces and those are part of the puzzle, but they're not the end. They're not the top, so to speak. They're just more, I think, outward representations of inner hidden power. So then the question becomes, well, then who sits at that table? And that's where chapter 2 is, volume 2 is going to pick up. And that volume, that one is filled with all kinds of people. That's why it turned out to be 2 hours long. We have Whitney has been featured in one of the episodes, and she might be in this last one. Catherine Austin Fitz is going to be in this last one. David Icke, James Corbett, Mark Passio, Larkin Rose.
The OGs, the best of the best.
Lots of great researchers. Adam Green over at No More News, he feels very strongly, of course, about the power of the Jewish influence and Zionists. So I let him have his say there. And the cool thing about it too is that people will see when they watch the final episode that I didn't come in with a pre-crafted narrative of like, I'm only going to interview people who tell me what I want to hear, and then I'm going to use that to make my own point. So there are times when somebody I interviewed about a particular topic, I let them have their say, but then somebody else I interviewed is kind of not necessarily directly talking, but exactly, is contradicting and saying, hey, well, I don't know if that's true. What about this? Particularly when it comes to like there's for example, a section with Adam Green where, for those who don't know him at No More News, he definitely heavily focuses on the Jewish power. And particularly he says that there is in his words, a messianic death cult, that basically people who've taken Judaism and who are determined to bring back the Messiah and will do anything to make that happen. And that they believe, Jewish people should kind of be at the top of that. And he believes that people who get into theories of the Masons or the Jesuits or the Sabbatean Frankists, and which some of my other guests have mentioned and will include in the documentary, included David Icke, he believes that that's kind of a waste of time, a red herring, a distraction. So I have somebody talking about it, then I have him kind of saying, no, this is a waste of time, and then vice versa. So you're not just going to get one perspective on these topics. You're going to get a lot of different perspectives. And then in the end, of course, I will draw my own conclusions and share what I think. And as every episode in this series, it does end with solutions, some suggested ideas.
I was going to say,
what do we actually do about all this?
Yeah, that's my favorite part about your work and why I reached out to you a few years ago to start working together, because there weren't a lot of people giving solutions, particularly to the threat, I think, which is the biggest threat right now, which is full on global technocracy. And it's going at full steam ahead. And you're somebody who always cuts through the BS. I always check out Conscious Resistance, or I know you write on Last American Vagabond and other places, but you tend to be before a lot of people because of the level of work that you've done all these years. You can kind of see like that we're being distracted by this, like all the Epstein stuff right now, you and I have known for years. It's not, and the whole game that's being played, that's one thing that's going on. Then you got the whole like breakup of the MAGA people that's going on. Then you got this going on. But you and I both know, I believe that the end goal of Agenda 2030, 17 development goals, is full track and trace surveillance from birth to death for every human, and capturing of all natural resources and all of that. And what's very scary right now for many people that thought Donald Trump was going to win and woo, life is going to, everything's going to be great again. No. The only thing that happened was that people were given a little more time to wake up and take back their own power and their own life and their own community and all of that. And you've talked a lot in your work about freedom cells and decentralizing your life and individual sovereignty and all these things that we've been convinced we don't have the ability to do. And now we're at a place where, we're watching to me, the global public infrastructure being built in America that is not, I'm not hearing anything about sovereignty when it comes to the global public infrastructure or the wearables or the, Internet of Body, Internet of Things, i.e. the new health, no more clipboard. I mean, one after another. And you have been saying this for a very long time. I've talked to you during, Trump's first term, second, the entire Biden term, as I call it, this new term. That one thing is not stopping and it's not changing, and it's getting scarier to me. And frankly, when you see Palantir, I think it was devastating to a lot of people that do have the idea that Trump was going to save the world. Then you see at the inauguration him surrounded by, Bezos and all the tech bros, PayPal mafia people, all these people, and not the people that, were out there fighting for him or ended up going to jail for not betraying him or that. No, this was the people that are building the global public infrastructure, and then having Larry Ellison there. And of course, Sam Altman, now last week we have Dr. Oz telling us that they're going to work with all the insurance companies and these companies. And to me, Derrick, which is very disturbing, is it's the fourth industrial revolution with an American, face. But I don't see any talk of sovereignty Now we could take back our physical sovereignty at the borders, maybe, but I'm not hearing about sovereignty for the global public infrastructure, which is the most dangerous to me. Is there any talk of America not being on the same path as the EU? Because that's what it looks like.
Definitely not from the Trump administration. I mean, you outlined there perfectly all the, many of the different incidents in Stargate. You mentioned Altman and Ellis in there. That was happening right at the beginning. And this whole make health tech great again initiative is just another technocrat, big tech, AI firm partnership, which is just going to accelerate their ability to have access to data about all of our lives, health information, bank information, et cetera. So I don't think, and I think you're correct to see, and I'm glad to see that you've been, informing your audience of this, that the Trump 2.0, for whatever hope people might have had and whatever good things they might point to, I think the overall larger picture of technocracy is absolutely being advanced. And I would even argue that probably faster than it might have happened under Harris, because there would have been resistance. And instead, there's a lot of people who are willing to make excuses or just say we just have to wait and see when it comes to Trump. I think we've wait and seen enough of these relationships and what they're about. And, even to your, excuse me, to your point about everything going on, one might ask, okay, Derrick, well, what's the importance of making this big documentary, with all this going on? Obviously, it's taken me 5 years. It hasn't stopped me from doing my other work. This has been kind of ongoing in the background. But I think that even when it feels like here in 2025, we're 5 years away from 2030, when these people claim they would like to have their fourth industrial revolution, digital infrastructure, technocracy complete, we've got 5 years, and that's going to go by extremely fast. I still think that it's important and relevant to have these conversations because, for one, we need a lot more people to wake up. And I don't think we've got those numbers yet. I mean, sure, it's great that there's millions of us on Twitter and elsewhere, but does that necessarily translate into real world power and influence, shaping decisions, limiting and stopping these horrible programs? So far, it hasn't. We haven't seen, we're all talking about it online, but there's not massive protests in the US or UK or Australia about digital ID programs rolling about online verification starting to happen under the guise of, saving the children to stop porn or whatever else it may be.
Right.
We're not seeing major resistance to it. Sure, we're seeing a lot of bitching on the internet about it, and that's great. But I do think that we're at a point where in my view, that there should be more people waking up and questioning this. And I think that's also just kind of goes back to my, I guess, deeper purpose or goals is that on one hand, as you said, I do focus on solutions. I've got my own land. I'm living the solution out here that I believe is necessary. We're about to start building our homes. We're trying to share this with people. A lot of my content is going to be documenting that process in hopes of inspiring other people. But I still also believe there are still many minds and hearts trapped in the matrix that need to be pulled out so that they can join us in this fight for humanity. And maybe one of them have the solution we've been looking for. And we just need to get them out from underneath the spell they're under. And so for me, one of the great ways to do that is documentaries. And those who've been around for the last 15 or more years, remember the early Wild West of YouTube and all the conspiracy documentaries that were out there, from Alex Jones's earlier stuff, Obama deception and police state and all these other ones. Endgame I watched in 2009, and that totally rattled my cage and set me on a path that I'm on today. I don't really stand by Jones these days, but the work still did have an impact. And I just recognize the power that documentaries can have. But the one thing that I wanted to do with the Pyramid of Power that's different than, say, Jones and others is I didn't want it to be hyperbolic. I didn't want it to have a bunch of scary music. Like a lot of these documentaries you watch and you feel afraid. You feel like the tension, you feel anxiety. Like, oh my God, the music's like dun, 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 like
right.
New World Order, Endgame. It's just, I didn't want to create that state of panic in my audience, but I did want to inform them with facts, back it up with the data that we can prove. And as I said, make it in these bite-sized chunks that can be for the Netflix generation and have solutions for the end of each episode. I think it's a little bit more palatable in that way. And now that it's coming to an end, people can really just start with episode 1 and 10 hours later they're done. And who knows what their life is like after that. Because I actually added it up between all 4 seasons. And when the final 2 episodes of volume of chapter 17 are out, it's going to be 10 and a half hours worth of content that's going to be out there for free. Right. And then we're going to make it into DVDs. We're going to put it on USB drives. We're going to make a book version. Cool. Like, I'm going to be promoting this for the rest of my life. So to me, it doesn't matter necessarily what the news of the day is in terms of trying to wake people up. Yes, that plays a role. And for those of us who are paying attention already, we want to keep up with this. But for the normie who hasn't heard of the Mel K Show or the Conscious Resistance or any of these things, I've created a series that I hope people out there can get their friends and family and say, look, it's just half an hour. Just sit down and watch this.
Well, we need it.
Half an hour,
That's what, yeah. I mean, you gave it a bite size that people can focus. And I mean, I'm super excited to share it with everyone. I'm going to put it in my newsletter as well, because the truth is that people will be empowered by how much, I mean, my hope is people will be empowered on how much they don't know and how much they've been deceived. And I have been working on, I think I'm going to start my second book about 1944 to 1954. What happened post World War II, and particularly the I think infiltration of America that we are still dealing with to this day, particularly with the international organizations. And I've been talking a lot. I've been saying, why aren't we repealing this International Organization Immunity Act from 1947? And as I dig into that, then I'm like, and this happened and that happened. So much happened in the chaos after World War II within those 10-year period to, I think, not just set up America to be looted, destroyed, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, everything thrown away basically in real time. But when they're talking about that we're $37 trillion in debt, why do people think that is? Like, do they know anything about the IMF, the World Bank, that we've been funding that, the endless wars, what they were really about? So to me, a documentary like yours that's going through, who these players are, because in what I'm working on right now, it is the same people before World War I that right now want World War III, and they don't care who dies and they don't care what happens. That's not the way it works. And even you talking about the Rhodes, scholars and the Round Table movement and all of that, it's still alive and well, like the Circle and the Pilgrims and all of that. And and then there would be like the skull and bones. No, this stuff is real, and that's the hardest part, is that the people that go into these positions that continue down this path, like a Carney or van der Leyen or, any of the people, a Larry Fink or whatever, they were groomed to be this. And they don't look at people. Tragedy and Hope is a good one to point to. I don't think they look at the 8 billion human beings on planet Earth as mattering at all. I mean, I really don't think that. And it's hard for people to accept that maybe, over decades and decades, people get to a place where they are conditioned to just be that. And the good part is, though, I feel like the generation right now that is running the international organizations are not nearly as smart or as, maybe diabolical or as educated or whatever the case may be. They dumb down our own children while they dumb down their own, possibly. But I do feel like if we get the information out and have enough people understand something you talk about a lot, which I'll say in a second, which is it's in everyone's backyard. It's not, thinking that the 10 by 10, cesspool, I call the sewer in DC, is where change is going to happen is a farce. It is a lie. The whole two-party system's a fraud. All of it's a fraud. If you can start there and then say, well, where is everything? Well, it's in your backyard, because I believe, as JFK said, infiltration instead of invasion. That's exactly what happened. And it just built upon itself over and over, which is where I want to ask you now. Do you still feel that America, in your experience, do you still feel that America is unique among the world, that we possibly, if enough people rose up locally, got together and freed themselves, as you suggest, and, dumped the whole partisan BS, the black, white, gay, straight, all the nonsense that doesn't matter, that divides us, and stood together in terms of privacy and liberty and autodetermination and all the things that actually should matter to humanity? Do you think America could still get in the way? Or do you feel like it's already built here, and only the people that are awake, like you, and I have a lot of friends right now buying land, all kinds of the same things that you suggest. Do you feel America is still in a unique position? For any of you that have been with me for the long haul, you know that you've seen me go from out of shape to in shape to gaining weight during the COVID to losing weight finally. And guess what? I realize I want to feel great. I want to feel it inside. And that's why I have decided to team up with my friend Tim, who runs Chemical Free Body. I have been watching them for years. A lot of my friends at Union of the Unwanted are also Chemical Free Body people. We have decided to get the chemicals out of our bodies, to live our best life now, to detox out whatever's in us. I mean, you hear about the glyphosate and the aluminum and the what they're spraying here and there. Well, let me tell you something. Chemical-free body has something for everyone and everything that you are possibly worried about. This is from real-life experience of being a master detox program. Well, chemical-free body has the solution if you are ready to be clean on the inside. So go to the Mel K Show partners page right now and click on Chemical Free Body. Use the code MELK for a discount and start feeling amazing from the inside out.
On one hand, I do think that the U.S. does and has represented something unique for generations since the founding. There's two things I'll say on that, and some of it ties into the research I was doing for the Pyramid of Power, trying to see how far back does this network really go, right? And I definitely think that there's a lot of Americans, many of them among MAGA and just mainstream Republicans and conservatives, who still buy a fantasy fairy tale version of the founding of America, because the secret societies were absolutely involved with the founding of the U.S. from the beginning. And, and that's a deeper conversation for a whole other day. But I just want to make that point clear that I don't necessarily think that there's ever been a time in America where this cabal wasn't trying to control and direct things. And in fact, you can go back and look at letters with George Washington when he was sent a book that I have on my shelf here, Proofs of a Conspiracy, one of the first books written by a Scottish man, John Robison, who was warning about how he saw the Freemasons and the Illuminati within the Freemasons taking over France and influencing the French Revolution and being part of the Jacobins and the ones who were responsible for the Reign of Terror and some of the worst atrocities. And so he was warning other people that same group of people who had influenced and infected the broader Freemason movements around the world was now making their way to the US. And so Washington had been sent a copy of this book by another priest and said, hey, I need you to read this book. It's about, all this stuff going on. And so we actually have those letters from Washington. And he says in the first couple, he didn't get a chance to read the book. He'd only been into a Mason lodge once or twice. But by the end of this correspondence, and this is 10 years after the founding of the US, this isn't, this is like pretty soon right after we're told it's the greatest time in America and everything's, been something new. He's saying by the end of his life, he basically came to believe that same group was influencing the United States. He said that he's seen their influence. They're definitely in the Mason lodges. So I want to make that clear is that I do think the U.S. is unique. And I also think the U.S. has been controlled and co-opted since the beginning. Doesn't mean there haven't been periods of,
No, I agree with you.
Good things happening and whatnot. But yeah, the evidence is there. The other thing is that in many ways, the people who were influencing and trying to guide the founding of the U.S., this goes into Francis Bacon, the New Atlantis, and all this sort of stuff. They did see that the U.S. was going to be something new, but not necessarily in favor of individual liberty and bodily autonomy and the things that we believe. They thought it would be a new home for their kind of Enlightenment ideals. And again, this is a deeper conversation because I have a lot of thoughts on, this Enlightenment movement. For all its benefits, there's definitely some horrible things that we've seen come from it. And at the same time, I try to put it in the context. Okay, the time was the religion and church and the Vatican still had a lot of control over our lives. If you said the wrong thing, you could be called a heretic and burned at the stake or killed, right? So many people, I think rightfully so, were rebelling not only against government, but against the control that religion had on everyday life. And so people wanted to be free to, think what they want, freedom of speech. A lot of the beautiful ideas we love today came about at this time. But at the same time, in that same group of people who were pushing for Enlightenment ideals, some of them didn't just want freedom of expression. They wanted to actually suppress and abolish and eliminate religious belief. And so that's what you saw.
I think that's where we are still.
I think those same people still, we saw that happen in France and in other revolutions where one of the first things they do is they burn the churches. They try, instead, like with the French Revolution, they try to have logic or the God of reason as the sort of new. So they just want to replace it with their own sort of religion, so to speak, even though they're very anti-religious. So I say all that to say, I definitely think that there is that same agenda existing in the U.S. to try to control its destiny and direction. And the U.S. is unique. There's no denying that the U.S. is unique for simple things like the gun culture, for the ability to just walk into a gun range and practice shooting. Like that's not something that exists in many, many countries around the world. Private gun ownership, these different principles that we've seen have been at least, superficially enshrined in the U.S. they still do exist, at least in the hearts and minds of Americans, if not in the hearts and minds of the politicians and the people who want to erase them. So I think that does make the U.S. unique. And also, just one final thought on that. And I'll never stop fighting for the U.S. I don't live there anymore, but I go back often, every other month or so, because my family's there in Texas, and I visit. And even during COVID, when I first moved down to Mexico, I drove all the way back to Texas to organize anti-COVID protests in Houston, because that's my hometown. And so I'm never going to give up, but I do have a feeling that if the American people don't wake up soon, it will be nearly impossible to turn things around. And I chose Mexico because I feel like there's some chance to kind of build the awareness out here and reverse course before it goes too far, because Mexico is a little bit behind in terms of some of the technocracy. That doesn't mean they're not trying. They're definitely trying out here with some recent bills they're trying to push. But the government is way more corrupt. The people don't trust government. The people don't pay taxes. It's just going to be harder for them to force the infrastructure. But in America, because of the 1920s and the post-World War II, so much wealth came in. A lot of people got comfortable. People have got credit card debt and student loan debt. There's so many ways that they can squeeze people and sort of socially engineer people into technocracy. So I still have hope for America, but my hope lessens day by day when I don't see Americans getting organized, pushing past the partisan shit you were talking about, and actually coming together. I mean, that's what makes me have some doubt, but that doesn't mean I think it's hopeless.
Well, let me ask you about this, because there's a big movement. I watched their meeting last week. This weekend is the big Democrat Socialists of America that have nothing to do with Democrats. They say it themselves. It is a socialist movement, but it looks like it's a amalgam of a lot of different things, be it the Palestine, the private property, the school, everything is involved. The unions are very, very involved, particularly the teachers union, the SEIU, all of that. They're having their big Democrat Socialist of America event this weekend. It looks like Mamdani will probably win in New York. A lot of this is very is right in our faces, because there's the Democrat Socialists. They say they have, 100,000 members. But if you look around, you're going to see that they are in city councils and school boards and all of that. And they've aligned with it looks like they've aligned with the Islamic culture, like at least in Texas and other places. So these aren't groups that hold the Constitution of the United States or the Bill of Rights or in high regard as Republicans. I don't know about Democrats, but claimed that the Constitution, the Bill of Rights are, and you've said it on the show too, and I say it all the time because you've said it, is like, it's just a piece of paper if you're not living by it, if it's not living and breathing. But some of these new ideologies that are rising, particularly in youth out of colleges, but, under 30, probably a lot of people, they're stuck with this crazy debt. They got degrees that mean nothing. Their universities are, are billion-dollar businesses that kind of send them out into the world with debt and nothing much else. I understand it. Housing's too expensive. But it does appear that those movements are growing, and they are antithetical to the Constitution, from what I read on their websites or what I know of, at least the people that are working down at Epic City outside. I think it's outside of Houston. They have Sharia courts there inside their communities. So is that something that you think is growing and could continue to grow, that is a problem, or is that something that's you think temporary?
I think it's both. I think that there's definitely, as things get more fractured and inflation increases, as we know it will, because nobody, including Donald Trump, will address the Federal Reserve. They won't address the root cause of why the inflation continues. There are going to be groups like the Democratic Socialists of America. I've definitely met some other activists I know back in Houston who were associated with that. I've seen them at different events, not really a huge presence, but, I've seen them out there, whether it's about Palestine or healthcare or whatever different things that they're into. So they've been around, and they do have a growing influence. And as the country gets more difficult to survive and thrive in, because I'm 40 years old, and you look at the 40 and younger, the millennials and to Gen Z, there's not so many people, especially Gen Z, but even more with the millennials as well, that don't have hope of ever actually being able to own their own house, that don't have hope of having a healthy relationship in a family, whether it's because they lack the resources or the funds, or they're just because they're living at their parents still. Like, these things are a lot more common than people might want to believe in the United States, that there are just not so many people who the idea of the so-called American dream even applies to them. They just like, what do you mean? I never even had an opportunity for that. And so when you have that situation where people their money's inflated and they're constantly losing value, and as you said, maybe it's student loan debt, maybe it's credit card debt, or what have you, there are going to be groups that will pop up both left and right that will say, we have the solution. We have the solution. Let's do some radical transformation of America, whether that's democratic socialist policies or some, there's also, of course, people on the right who want their own sort of Christian theocracy. They think that's the answer to solve everything, right? There's laws in Texas to try to, force the Bible to be in classes, or the 10 Commandments. And I believe people should be able to believe what they want, but I'm a very strong believer in separation of church and state. I think that's important. So my point is that there's going to be false solutions like that, like the DSA and others, that I think we will continue to see gain influence, because it's just a natural thing that as things get worse, Americans are going to look for a solution. They're going to look for somebody to blame. They're going to look for somebody to fix it. And in that space, that is where it's very possible for people who we are not ideologically aligned with, and who I don't think have the best interest at heart, or at least people who are so lost in their ideology that they've convinced themselves that what they're going to try to do is going to be good for people. But history shows us what happens when you have central planning and authoritarianism from a socialist front, as well as from a right-wing front. It doesn't lead to human liberty at all. And so I think this is, again, why, to me, making documentaries, doing podcasts, continuing to try to advocate for waking up more people. I know that we all have different approaches. I have some friends who say, I don't focus on waking people up anymore. I'm just focused on trying to reach the people who already get it. And that's fine. And we all have our own tact. But I do think that getting out there and trying to reach people is important, because this is a battle of hearts and minds. What you're describing with the DSA is just one example. We could talk about other groups left and right and say, how bad would it get if these people got power? Yeah, Mamdani's becoming huge. Like, we could look at these groups and say, how bad will things get if they get power, right? And the fact of the matter is that they're going to keep popping up from left and right. And if you and I and others out there who have the ability to communicate the message of individual human liberty and freedom of speech and bodily autonomy, if we're not out there representing those ideas, then the youth are only going to hear about DSA or Christian theocracy or some other authoritarianism from left and right that we can't even imagine yet. So I really do feel that as much as I hate getting into the trenches of debating people on the social media, because it often just feels like a waste of time, in terms of putting out content and trying to reach people, I do think it's a crucial period right now, because if we're not out there representing these ideas, then they're going to hear about the Mamdanis and they're going to hear about the other folks out there. And those are going to be the ideas that win, unless we make an effort to go out there and represent human liberty.
Yeah. Now, in the pyramid of power, I'm sure that you covered quite a bit, the Rockefeller family and their influence. And of course, they're just a front family, in my opinion, of the bigger international banking cartel. But as you brought up before, the Federal Reserve was such a betrayal on this country, and still people don't really understand it. And you have Trump yelling about Powell and Pulte yelling and this guy yelling. And I keep being like, they don't work for America. Like, what, why don't you understand this? And then, when you dig into it and you start talking about it, then of course you're an anti-Semite. And I'm like, no, I'm talking about the Bank of International Settlements is who Powell works for, the central banks, and a lot of people don't even know that at this point. It's shocking to me that people have no idea that the Federal Reserve and the 12 governors do not work for the United States of America. And you have somebody like Pulte, who's in Housing and Human Services, putting out tweets like, fire Powell, you can't just, that's not how it's set up. There are things you can do. But the one thing that people push back a lot, you can end the Fed, you could go back to sound money, all of that, but people think that that's impossible. I don't think that's impossible. I don't see why we're being told that's impossible. And frankly, Donald Trump came in, he said he was going to audit all the gold. Well, the rest of the world's going all full gold, and, there's an option there. But like you said, do people just not understand that $37 trillion of debt is not, this is not normal. This did not happen in a bubble, that the root cause really is the infiltration, I think, of the international banking cartel that I think runs the world and pays for both they want World War III right now, because I feel like that's the next step of after World War I, World War II. I was just reading Anthony Sutton's book about Wall Street and Hitler. And I think we're still dealing with the same people. But I mean, the Federal Reserve at this point, that it still even exists, if the American people understood what happened here and what this is about, I feel like they would be outraged and maybe find common ground there. And yet, what do you think it is that nobody will even go there? It's that time of year again. People are getting sick. They're getting the flu. They're getting the cold. They're getting all different kinds of things. And I have always been very grateful for my friendship with Dr. Zelenko, Dr. Z. And though he's not with us anymore and I miss him every day, he has left behind the best remedy to me for anything that ails you. And that is Z-Stack from Dr. Zelenko. There's Z-Flu, Z-Stack, and Z-Kids. There's also many other products there. It's all about naturally boosting your immune health and fighting anything that comes your way. Dr. Zelenko is ahead of his time. He is out there fighting for us still to this day, and he's left behind the best gift. The gift is your health. So go to melkdrz.com.
Well, you make a couple of great points there, Mel. I mean, I agree that the banking system is definitely high on that list. And I believe that's chapter 12 of the Pyramid of Power. People can find that one. It's called the Banking Cartel and the Future of Money. And it goes directly into everything that we know is on the horizons, whether it comes from CBDCs or stable coins. We end up with the same goal: trackable, traceable money that can be controlled. And, you know, the other thing, you talk about that debt. I guess in my simpleton mind, I've never understood why we even paid that any attention. Like it's a fake debt by criminals who are trying to hold future generations hostage with it, and say that our children and their children and their children are going to be paying on this just indefinitely and forever. You know, it's garbage to me. I just don't understand why we don't wipe this. I mean, I say I don't understand, but obviously I do understand why there's people who don't want it. But, you know, if we lived in a common sense world, you just wipe the slate clean, you go back to sound money, you start fresh and say, you know what, these were false debts under false pretenses by criminal elements. We're not going to honor them. And so be it. You know, the IMF falls apart, the World Bank falls apart, so be it. Right. And we get back to something that actually can represent real money. I mean, I think about this often, like simple things like the price of a movie ticket, right? Just not that long ago, say 20 years ago, 2005, I remember going to the movies and it still cost $5, maybe $6, right? And just think of that, like in 20 years now, it's a $15, if you can find it, and up ticket to go to a movie. And
think about kids,
a family. Too. Yeah, exactly.
When we were kids, that was something kids could do. Well,
you can go take $5 and all my
friends went to the movies. You know, they took away by raising the price of things like that. They took away community too. I mean, at this point, again, I don't think that they all talk about mainstream, but I don't think community or, you know, I think the whole thing was about isolation. I don't think community and interacting with your community and valuing, you know, how your neighborhoods run or who your mayor is or your neighbors, whatever. I think that it was already bad. But after COVID, I don't think it really came back because so many children started going into this world, which is another part of what is scary right now, started going into the metaverse, which you and I did a show about it a long time ago. But now the metaverse is being truly normalized. I don't know. I'm sure you did, but I was watching, Joe Allen was talking the other day about like a lot of kids are now convinced or they're friends with their AI companion. Like this is when I think we talked about it, me and you probably 2 years ago when the World Economic Forum was backing Zuckerberg's metaverse. And I was like, it's Ready Player One. Like, look at what's outside in Ready Player One. It's the end of the world. And they look. But anyway, it seems to me too, that the human interaction, the human contact, that what really matters about being human is being, shown as less and less important, which scares me.
I agree. I mean, there's just study after study confirming that kids are just spending more and more time indoors and that it's causing them issues with daily communication, like little things like going out to the street and talking with other kids and solving your little kids' problems. That teaches children problem solving, how to dialogue, how to interact. It teaches them about their emotions. There's so many subtle things just from that interaction. Yeah. But increasingly kids are, of course, like just interacting through the computer screen. And I actually got to see some of this firsthand when I was back in Texas, when I was visiting with my nieces and nephews. I love my brother and sister. They're working class people taking care of their kids, and they're doing their best. So this is not a slight on them, but their kids are just doing what most other kids are doing. They're on their phones, right, all day. These are all 15 and under. They're on their phones. They have their own bedrooms, and they're just basically staying in the rooms. And I stayed in my room a lot as a kid. We were playing video games. We did that whole thing, but we also went out and played in the street. We went biking around. We did running around.
Called home. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean,
and they don't do that so much anymore. But one thing I will say, which I think is maybe a potentially positive, one is a direct experience with my nieces and nephews that I found when we were there. They do want to go outside. It's just that they don't necessarily, it's not their first inclination anymore because they're so used to the internet. But if Uncle Derrick says, hey guys, let's go to the pool, or let's go walk to the park, or let's go play, kickball at the park or whatever, they're down. They'll put the phones down. And I even say, look, no phones on this trip. We're just going to go there. You don't need it with you. And they'll do it. And they go out and they have fun for a few hours, and they're not sitting there like, oh no, I need my phone. It's just that they need that sort of push. And
right,
it is harder and harder for parents. If you're a working class parent who's just trying to put, food on the table, you're not there 24/7. This is why some schools are trying to get rid of the phones now, which I think is a good idea. But I also saw a study just in the last week that was showing exactly what we're talking about here, the problem with kids being on their devices. But it did say, it was actually a survey of different kids and asked them, like, what do you enjoy about being outside? What do you not enjoy? And all this sort of thing. And some of the results of the survey found that kids do want to be outside, but they want to be like less structured time. And they don't want parents to necessarily be there. They don't want parents hovering over them while they're having their fun, because again, that's how they can create the relationships. But if they don't get that, the only other place that they typically can go where they feel unsupervised to interact with their friends is the internet. And so it's a combination of maybe parents just not giving them some freedoms that they might want, or encouraging them to come out. Like I was saying, and giving them that initiative, like, let's go outside, let's park, let's go to the pool, whatever. And then them wanting less structured, supervised time and just more time with their friends. And so the result of that is just, they feel like, well, the only place we can do that is I can go on a chat room, I can go on TikTok or whatever, and I can talk to my friends, and my parents aren't watching every little thing I'm doing here. So I'd rather do that. So there's a lot of factors, but it's scary.
It leads to technocracy, though, is my point. The generation of children that are growing up like that, now we're into a second generation. They're very isolated, but these AI companions that are people's friends and people's girlfriends, and
very scary.
It's like out of Black Mirror. But what's scary is that if parents don't understand that they have to engage to make sure that their children are still going out and playing with their friends and can run around the neighborhood and all the things that we grew up like, then it's going to be so much easier to get them to accept technocracy. And then don't forget, I think they started drugging kids very young. It's funny. I had on this Dr. Juliet Engel, who's a survivor of MK Ultra. She's in her 70s. She said that when she was in the compounds in Northern California with the LSD and everything, that I didn't know it was Eli Lilly that supplied all the LSD to the CIA. And then she says that it was the precursor to Prozac, that the whole goal was kind of like a Brave New World, Soma world. And I really worry about our children, because if we're fighting saying, no, we don't want technocracy. We don't want this, no sovereignty. We don't want track and trace surveillance. We don't want data. I mean, that the Patriot Act has never even been called into question is shocking enough. But for me, the real thing is parents really have to pay attention to their children, or aunts and uncles, or neighbors, or whatever, because they're going to be the easiest to convince to go right into technocracy. And, if your kids aren't like, no, I don't want to do that. If they're, walking right in because the school's pushing it and the internet's pushing it and their AI friends pushing it. And then they're not, I look at a day where maybe they don't even know something else existed. And that's like the real fight.
We definitely don't want it to get to that point. And you just made me remember one thing I want to share, Mel, as we start to wrap up, is that in terms of kids, is that I got really, really blessed, I'll say, when I've been contacted at this point, probably 5 to 10 different parents who've told me that they've used the Pyramid of Power series to homeschool their kids.
Cool.
And
That's what
when
I
they
was
have
gonna
their
say.
kids, they'll say like this, they'll say, well, look, they have government curriculum, and I just tell them to watch some of your episodes and do reports on them. That's
Exactly.
super humbling. I mean, like I
Cool.
said, my goal is to reach people. I never really thought that the younger, folks would find it through their parents. But even more cool than that, when I was visiting Texas just back in May, visiting my family, one of these young dudes, he's an 18-year-old recent homeschool high school graduate. He
Great.
reached out to me directly and said, hey, I know your work. My mom used it to homeschool me, and I heard you're going to be back in Texas. Would you come to my homeschool graduation? And I actually got to go visit with his family.
Oh my God, how awesome.
And it was so cool. It was, I mean, honestly, like that's the reason that I make this documentary,
That's where
to
I was
reach
heading
people on
with
a
them
real
asking
level
you.
like that, and yeah, so it's super humbling to just have somebody
Cool.
sharing it with their kids, but not only that, having the student himself reach out to me and say, hey, you want to come hang out for a little bit? We're having a celebration.
How great is that?
So of course we did. We went and hung out with the family for a couple hours and got to meet them and got to hang out with him a little bit.
Great.
And yeah, it was a really cool experience.
Well, that's where I was going with asking about the kids, because frankly, a lot of my friends finally have gotten that homeschooling is the only option. And so I tell people to look at your work. I give a list of websites I think are good. But anyway, I do want to let you go. I've had you for a while. So let's remind everyone how to follow you, how to find you, how to watch the Pyramid of Power. Just go through it and let everyone know.
Thank you, Mel.
Sure.
Yes, of course. So my main website is always theconsciousresistance.com, guys. That's where you can find all my documentaries. If you want to see the previous episodes of the Pyramid of Power, the main website is thepyramidofpower.net. And if you do want to sign up for Civil to see the chapter 17 before anybody else, again, the website is civl.com/TCR, civil.com/TCR. And again, if you sign up for the annual subscription, which is normally $50 a month, $50 a year, you can get 50% off of that with the code TCR50, and that's exclusively for your audience, Mel. So if you guys want to sign up, you want to support another independent, they're like us, we're independent journalists. They're trying to do independent content that actually isn't pushing a propaganda, that's pushing a positive message, and that is really trying to upgrade humanity and encourage more discussion and more self-respect and mutual respect. So I'm really happy to partner with them. The series will be available, Volume 1, all this month, and then it'll go public on all of my channels on September 5th. And then in November, we're going to do the same thing for Volume 2, first on Civil and then publicly after that. So thanks again, Mel, for having me on.
Well, I love having you on, and I will see you again, and we will have you back probably before number 2, but we'll definitely have you back soon.
Let's do it.
Thank you so
Let's
much. Okay, bye-bye. And make sure you tune in to Mel K in the mornings at 12 Eastern every single day. We are bringing you news you won't get anywhere else. So make sure you tune in every morning to know what is going on and what you're not hearing elsewhere. Mel K in the mornings. It's your place for your daily dose of truth. Looking for coffee that actually does something for you? I know I was, and I was searching around trying to find something that would really make a difference. And then I found Danger Coffee. Remineralized with over 50 trace minerals and electrolytes to fuel hydration, energy, and vitality. It's mold-free, lab-tested, ethically sourced, and roasted fresh for peak flavor. It is delicious. Single origin, specialty grade, pure performance in every cup. Ready to upgrade your brew? Click the link at themelkshow.com or visit dangercoffee.com. Use code MELK10 at checkout for a discount and start drinking dangerously with Danger Coffee.
Derm is a luxurious, toxin-free skincare that actually works. Not only do we take the toxins out, we put the most powerful nutrients in. All of our products are an effective way to detoxify, replenish, and protect your skin. Our toxin-free, natural ingredients provide real results without compromising your skin's health. Unlock the secret to beautiful, healthy skin using this synergistic skincare system. It's never too late or too early to begin living a more beautiful life with Givaderm. Natural, healthy skin.
So head on over to themelkshow.com. Go to the part.